What's up everyone, and thank you for stopping by the channel. Today's project is this homelite leaf blower, and the problem is that it starts, but it doesn't run very well, and it never gets to full speed. Let's take a good look at it, find out what's wrong with it, and hopefully we can fix it. In this video, we try and repair this blower. However, it may not be the exact repair you need to make to yours. We'll explore other options later in the video. This blower had been serviced a couple of years ago with new fuel lines and a reconditioned metering diaphragm. It ran okay back then, but it never really was a monster when it came to performance. But it worked well when it came to blowing grass clippings around. Unfortunately, in the years since then, its maintenance has been kind of sketchy, and in the end, it now has a running problem. It didn't come with any fuel in the tank, so I'll put some fresh fuel in it and try starting it. If it does start, then I'll use a flathead screwdriver to adjust the carburetor to see if it makes any difference. Unfortunately, there is yet another problem. It looks like the carburetor is leaking fuel. If we do get it running, we'll definitely have to remove the carburetor and inspect it for any problems. Now, since the carburetor is leaking fuel, the air filter is probably soaked with it, so I'm going to remove it and then try starting it again. Now, after taking the wet filter out of the way, it finally started, but it didn't want to get to full speed when the trigger was squeezed. Now, I was able to adjust it so it runs better, but since it's leaking fuel, we've got to go through the carburetor, so I'm not going to describe all the adjusting I did, because more than likely, we'll probably have to readjust it anyway. Let's pour out the fuel and take the carburetor off the engine. Now, while I'm here, I'll also take out the fuel lines because they seem to be damaged from ethanol gas. The fuel line I'm going to be using is Tygon line, which is supposed to be more resistant to ethanol gasoline. Now, to help feed the line into the fuel tank, cut the line at a sharp angle. Now, the first line will be the return line, so it only needs to be pushed in about an inch. The next line will be the fuel filter line, so the line needs to be pulled out of the tank so you can cut the angle piece off. That way you can install the fuel filter. Now, once you push the filter back into the tank, you'll need to pull the excess fuel line out to make sure that the filter is sitting at the bottom of the tank. After that, we can take the carburetor apart and inspect it for any problems. Now, after taking the top of the carburetor off, the inside is very clean, which is great news. At least we don't have to worry about cleaning it too much. Now, let's look at the metering diaphragm, and I hate to say it, but it seems to be quite stiff instead of being flexible like it's supposed to be. That means we're going to have to replace it. Now, you can order these online, and the way I order them is by the picture. The most important part is that the metal stem in the middle needs to be the same length as the one you're replacing. Now, if I take the other plate off the carburetor, I can see the pumping diaphragm, which is kind of hard to see because it's translucent. Now, this style very rarely deforms, so I don't have any problems reusing this part. The next thing I want to check is the round screen inside the carburetor, and I want to make sure it doesn't have any dirt or debris on it, which it doesn't. Now, if yours does, then check to make sure the fuel filter is still connected in the fuel tank. At this point, I'm ready to reassemble the carburetor with a new metering diaphragm. After that, I'll reinstall it back onto the engine. Another reason why your blower might not be starting or working the way it's supposed to is that the engine is simply worn out. If you think that this is the problem, then get a compression tester and test your engine to see if the reading is under 50 psi. Now, anything over 50 psi is fine, and the higher the better. It all depends on how the blower was maintained. Now, when you reconnect the fuel lines, the return line is connected to the top fuel port on the carburetor, and the fuel filter line goes on the lower port. After that, reinstall the air filter base, put some fuel into the tank, and then we'll try starting it. Unfortunately, while I was priming the fuel system, I found yet another problem. The fuel won't flow like it's supposed to. You can see the fuel moving back and forth in the return line, which it's not supposed to be doing. That means I have to remove the carburetor again, take it apart, and look for another problem. Now, this time, I'm going to take the rocker arm, the spring, and the needle out just to make sure there's not a problem with them. Well, I wasn't able to find anything wrong with it, so I'm going to put it back together again. Just make sure you don't lose the spring because it's really easy to drop. The next thing I want to check is the pumping diaphragm, and yet again, I can't see anything wrong with it, so I'm going to put it back on and reassemble the carburetor and then put it back onto the engine. Hopefully, it doesn't leak this time. Well, after priming the fuel system yet again, it's still not flowing in the lines like it's supposed to, and it's still leaking fuel, so that means I need to replace the entire carburetor. But there's one big problem I have to deal with. This blower is so out of date that I haven't been able to find this particular carburetor for sale. So now I have to figure out if I want to try and find the rebuild kit that may or may not work, or try retrofitting a different carburetor to work on this engine. The problem is finding a carburetor that will work on this setup has been very difficult. So my question is, what do you think I should do to try and fix this blower? Should I try the rebuild kit, or should I try to retrofit a different carburetor? Thank you for watching. I really appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask any questions, and I hope to see you in my next video.